an educator, a specialist, a therapist, but most of all, you'll be the mom to the most wonderful child. That was from Geraldine Renton. How true is this statement for you as a mother, and why was it so
Mhm.
important to include this excerpt in your book?
Thank you for that. And I mean, I still get chills every time I either hear the quote or listen to the quote, because when I started my journey, that was not something that I would have known. And there was no mechanism for helping you understand what it means to parent a child with a disability. My son Nathan, he's my fourth child, and he had a congenital diaphragmatic hernia issue while I was pregnant.
Mm,
So I always advocate for, prenatal care, because it was picked up at 5 months and it required major surgery after he was born, or he would have died.
wow.
And so he had the surgery 3 days after birth. It was touch and go for the first 20 days of his life, as they waited to see whether he would live or die.
Mm-hmm.
During that process, he developed acute jaundice. As parents, we especially in the Caribbean, we know about jaundice when a baby is born and has jaundice.
Mm-hmm.
And, you're told to put him in the sun, that kind of stuff. But his jaundice level was so high that we believe that's when the infraction took place that damaged the area of his brain that deals with motor coordination. Except nothing was said to us. And so after he completed that hospital stay and he came home, I was expecting him to thrive and to develop, and it was not occurring. And every time I spoke to the doctor at the hospital, they kept telling me to wait and see. But as parents, we have instincts. And
Yes.
there was something that was telling me that something was not right. And so I moved from the hospital where he was and took him to the pediatrician that my other children were seeing. And they put him on a monitoring program, and he was diagnosed with cerebral palsy at 9 months old.
Wow.
Except that's all we got, the diagnosis. And
Diagnosis.
the neurologist we saw thought it was pertinent to tell us what our son would never, ever, ever do. Never walk, never this, never go to school, never learn, never, 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 never is what I
Mm,
call that particular diagnosis.
mm,
And he was rather offended that I wasn't wailing and, throwing myself on the floor. And so he thought I wasn't taking it seriously. And I said to him, with all due respect, you're giving me a medical diagnosis, but I do understand you're not God, and you can't determine what a
mm.
child will do as they grow up. So I'm taking your information, taking it as advice. And so I now need to go learn what this means and how I need to support him. And
Yeah.
so it was that kind of journey in terms of when we talk about the things that are hidden, because in the
Mm-hmm.
middle of trying to figure out what's going on with your child, in the middle of trying to understand what this diagnosis means on the everyday, I call it the everyday thing, everydayness of life. What does that mean when I'm feeding him? What does that mean when I'm bathing him? What does that mean when he needs to go to school? Those are the details that I needed to work out. And while I'm working that out, I am going through my own emotional trauma. What did I do?
Mm-mm.
Did I do something wrong? How
Wrong.
could this have happened to my baby? You know, the guilt and all of those emotions. And there was pretty much nobody professionally there
Mm-hmm.
to walk you through all of that. And I have 3 young children at the same time who were walking through their own grief and everything that was occurring as we were going. And so pretty much we were in fight and flight mode for a while. And then a friend of mine, when Nathan turned 2, and of course, I was talking about what was never available in Jamaica. You can't find therapy, you can't find this, you can't find that. And so I lived in the place of what he didn't have. And that is a normal response when you are faced with trauma, because it is trauma.
Yes.
And a friend of mine said to me one day, "What is Nathan doing?" And I went into the what is not there. And she stopped me in my tracks and she said, "No, I'm asking, how is Nathan? How is a child? What is his favorite toy? What is his favorite this? What is his favorite that?" And I was ashamed to tell her I did not know,
No.
because up to the 2 years, I was more focused on the diagnosis that the child was masked, the child was hidden. And so she said to me, the eyes are the windows to the soul. Go home, look into your son's eye, go meet your son. And I went home, and Nathan with cerebral palsy, it's a movement disorder. And so he has difficulty sitting unsupported. He has difficulty tracking with his eyes. He has difficulty, he's nonverbal, and he gets fixated on things that he's doing. And so it's hard to interrupt him. And I went home and I sat him down and, I said, Nathan, we're going to do a little thing together today. And he just sat in his little wheelchair and he looked in my face, and I put my hand, his little face between my hands,
Oh
and
my
we stared
goodness.
into each other's eyes. And I'm not sure how long we did, but all of a sudden I saw this beautiful child emerging. I started
Mm,
noticing the sparkle in his eyes. His grandmother called them ackseed eyes. I
mm,
started noticing how long and luscious his eyelashes were, this perfectly formed brow. I started seeing, the little mischief on his face, the smile tugging at the corner of his lips. And it's like I saw into his soul. And what I saw was a beautiful, vibrant child. And we both just started laughing in the same moment. And I said to him, Hi, sweetheart, I'm your mom. And he
mm.
gave me this look like, you just figuring that out.
I know, right? And it's funny. I think I don't mean to interrupt, but I think
Mhm,
in term when you're explaining this moment, this
mhm,
special moment, it's almost as if at that very time you
mhm.
both connected,
Yes,
because there was a
yes.
disconnect for a
Mhm,
long time with you trying to focus on a diagnosis and
mhm.
not realizing that, hold on,
There's a child
there's a
right
child
there.
right before me
Mhm.
that, who needs his mother. And
Yes,
I
yes.
and I want to segue into another question, because, you know, hearing the diagnosis, I know in the book How to Cope Parenting a
Mhm,
Child with Special Needs that you wrote in 2020,
mhm,
you spoke about extensively about the stages of
mhm.
adjusting to the recent diagnosis. Could you
Yes,
share with
yes.
us those stages briefly for us?
Sure. So we go through what is known as the 5 stages of grief. It is actually a framework that guides people who are dealing with death and people who've gone through deep emotional loss. And there are academics who feel that it has place and space, because when your child is diagnosed with a disability, you actually go through that kind of a lost stage where you have to let go of any expectation that you have for your child. You have to come to a place, you go through denial and isolation. There are many parents who will say that their child don't have a disability. As a matter of fact, there was a physical therapist who worked with Nathan on one of our trips from Jamaica to Florida back in the day when he was younger, and she was pregnant and she had a baby. And the baby, after the child was born, I was diagnosed with developmental delays. And the physical therapist went into a stage of denial, and she did not even provide the basic stimulation that she does with other children. And so they had to report her to the state to get the state involved, to get the child, the intervention that the child needed. So you go through denial and you go through isolation. In my case, there were 4 of us pregnant in my workplace at the time, and my child was the only one who was born with a issue. And so I didn't have the cute baby pictures. I had pictures of horror of hospital. I didn't have the cute baby stories. I had sleepless nights and high blood pressure and all of those things. And so I felt alone and I retracted inside myself. Then I went to anger. I
Hmm.
was angry for when things aren't there. Why is it that our children in Jamaica are any different from any other child in the world where we can't access this? When I couldn't find services, I couldn't even find clothing for him. I couldn't find wheelchair. I went through an anger phase, and there was a point when I was known as that angry lady. And then I went into bargaining. I went into bargaining with God. If you do this, I will do that. If you do this, I will do that. And when none of that happened, I sank into depression. And here is the challenge with this. In other jurisdiction, there is some support wrap around the parents and the family that help you through the stages. in our culture in Jamaica, there's nothing available there. And the little services that are there are only around the children. And
Mm.
so many parents get stuck into these level of stages. And the last stage is acceptance. Many parents never ever make it to the acceptance
Acceptance phase.
space. So
Wow.
for me, I had a supportive family, a loving husband. I had other children. I had a beautiful community of friends. My faith was significant in helping me come to terms with the fact that God, in His wisdom, created everything and everyone in purpose, for purpose. So even though my son did not present like his other siblings or like others, that there was still value in him, there was still beauty in him, there was still purpose in him. And so through prayer, I asked the Lord to help me to see my son through his eyes, his God's eyes.
Mhm.
And one day, starting with that moment that I spoke about, I just saw this beautiful, vibrant child. And is that despite the disability, he was making gains, but all of the doctor's visits and every other visit focuses on the deficits and the lacks. They don't spend time to say, well, he has caught up in this area or caught up in
Up
that
in that
area. So
area.
I began to track these areas and realize, but this young man is amazing. He
Mm-hmm.
can't walk, but he has learned to roll on himself with no physical therapy support. He is nonverbal, but he has learned to communicate the way he needs to communicate. He is humorous, he is charming, he has the most beautiful smile. And all of a sudden, I began to see that there was so much beauty in this young man. I began to see the joy he brought into the hearts of other people.
Yes.
And that helped me to move to the stage of acceptance where I learned to see him as he is. I am not trying to change him, but I came to a place of recognizing that just like with my other children, my role as a parent is to support him the best way that I can to help him develop to his fullest potential, whatever
Potential.
that is. And it absolutely shifted the relationship that I have with him, but it also shifted the relationship that I had with his siblings because he taught me to see each of them as unique individuals and to accept each of them as they are and work and support them as best way I can.
I'm so happy you said that because, I had a conversation with my mom for her
Mhm,
birthday, and it somehow we spoke about the differences between my brother and I.
mhm,
And she said, as a mom, I can't I couldn't parent you the same way I parent your brother. You are both unique. You're from
mhm,
me, but you
mhm,
are both unique. So the
mhm,
fact that had to literally, through Nathan, along with his other siblings, you're realizing as a mom that I
mhm,
have to literally parent. It's different personalities
mhm,
that they're
mhm,
actually undertaking. And I
mhm.
must say, it's commendable in
Thank
terms
you.
of what mothers and in terms of what you're doing for
Mhm,
your children.
mhm.
Because sometimes, and you can assist me with this, sometimes when you're so focused on the child with the disability, the other siblings get left out.
Oh yeah. Oh, that happens a lot. And when I tell you about just divine timing, when we were leaving the hospital after his first an early operation, he was about 20, 25 days old. And he had, because the surgery cut him right across his abdomen, so he had a wound that wrapped from his navel
Mm-hmm.
to either side of him, just right across his body. And there was a nurse, she had retired for a long time and kept coming back, worked in England for a while. And she said to me, I've worked with children with your son's diagnosis, and it's going to be rough for a while. But the best gift that you have given to him are his siblings, because the oldest was 8, 6, and 4, and then him. And she said to me, when you go home, though he's medically fragile, do not keep him from them. Teach them how to hold him. They're going to want to help out. Let them help you out. Show them how to help. And that was the best advice I got So we look back at the pictures where the same day he came home from the hospital, there were the little ones with pillows in their laps and holding me on pillows. Everything I was doing, they wanted to help. I allowed them to help and I showed them. I did not separate them. And I remember when Nathan maybe was about 6 months and his body was loose like a noodle. It just didn't engage. And I was outside talking to a neighbor, and Jordan, she was 4, came and said, Mommy, we need you on the inside. And I said, give me a minute. And then a few minutes later, she came back and she said, we don't need you anymore. So, when a child tell you that, you need to go figure out what it was they
What
needed
it
you
was,
for in the
right?
first place. So I went in. Nathan had a bowel movement and they all pitched in and changed his diaper. Of course,
Oh,
the
wow.
soiled diaper was on the rug. Bowel movement was all over the floor, but
Lord.
Nathan was clean and changed, and they looked so proud.
Proud, yes.
And that really stood out for me in terms of just how far they were willing to go to support their brother. And that continues to be his life. Today, they're 28, 26, and 24. And
Mm-hmm.
Nathan just turned 20. And everywhere we go, people ask me, how did you get your children to be so involved in their brother's life? And I
Yes.
said it really started from the very beginning. He was introduced because he was their brother too. And he was introduced to them and they were allowed to be part of his life. And that continues to be the case. And so, yes, a lot of times we tend to overly focus on the children with special needs and we ignore the other siblings.
Mm-hmm.
And we understand why, because you're dealing with the one that has the most needs.
Right.
And we learn because they lost a lot of privileges when he was born, because when the money dried up, we couldn't do vacation anymore. And so we got creative. We went and we did Rivers of Jamaica. Every summer,
Mm-hmm.
once a week, we would go out and go to a different river of Jamaica. We had movie nights where we used a projector on the wall in our bedroom and we had snacks on the floor because we couldn't afford to go to movie theaters anymore. And I found that those are the memories that means most to the siblings today. And my husband, for Father's Day, they are planning to recreate a movie night event for him for Father's Day because it just really bonded us as a family. And so we're very tight knitted. Is the end of that. But all of that is created with intention.
Awesome. Awesome. Love it. Absolutely love it. And of course, with you sharing your story with others as well as your journey, you were able to start the Nathan Ebanks Foundation. Can you share
Yes.
with our listeners the mandate of the organization and how it's changing the lives of so many who are diagnosed with cerebral palsy?
Thank you. So after I had taken Nathan the first time he was 2 to Florida for interdisciplinary assessment, it was the first one he had gotten where all of these different specialists, 9, met with us and gave us the different diagnoses from their standpoint and made recommendations for what was needed for him. They also spent time just educating me as a parent in terms of what I could do to support his development in those domains. So I came back after 3 weeks of Jamaica, very hyped up. And, I decided I'm going to have a workshop because corporately I was responsible for those kinds of training events and so on for a large company in Jamaica. And so I put the skill to work and I organized a workshop trying to find those same specialists, only to find that we didn't have any of them actually in
Mm.
Jamaica at the time. But nonetheless, I had psychologists and some other people, and the workshop was themed Building a Brighter Future for Children with Special Needs in Jamaica. And it was intended to be a one-off shot, but it was so effective, informational, not just for parents. We had equal numbers of early childhood teachers attending. And that was supposed to be it. And then people started calling me because other doctors and other professionals in Jamaica who learned about what I was doing started referring people to me. And that was actually how the Nathan Ebanks Foundation came about, because it made me realize the magnitude of the problem that we had. And it made me realize that, with the exception of people who were professionally trained, like in special education through MICA or the University of the West Indies at the time, that there weren't any place where a parent could go and get information to inform their practice of working with their children. And so the Nathan Ebanks Foundation became a bridge that sought to support a holistic development of children with disabilities. And we brought in a lot of specialists, therapists and speech therapists and, special educators. And we did a lot of conferences to build capacity. But in the middle of that, I found that a lot of the issues that teachers were having now fell into the realm of special education needs. The child might not have a disability, but there may be some disabling factors that is impacting learning. So we expanded to helping teachers understand how to work with children with dyslexia and autism, and children, boys who learn differently. And we got into a lot of that work. And through that work, I can say to date, we've impacted about 10,000 parents and
Wow.
children. A number of children have accessed speech therapy evaluations for the first time. I used to run clinics. So I have a speech therapist, and from the moment, we were laughing about it last night, from the moment she landed, she was seeing children right until the moment she got back on the plane.
Wow.
Giving children, the evaluation report that allows them to access special education accommodation through the Ministry of Education.
Yeah.
We also introduced a Family Expo and Special Needs Resource Fair, where the event once a year drew together all of the different agencies and organizations supporting that population. And it's a free event, and parents and others can actually come and learn what is available and get connected with resources. So it really was about building out the support community for other families, because I always remember how alone I felt. And then I also remembered how people who didn't have the skill nor knowledge, how they tried to help me. And I felt that my son's disability was a gift, in the sense that through what he was experiencing and what I was learning, that it could help others who are coming behind me. And I've always told people that it gave purpose to our pain,
Purpose for
because we could see
pain.
how children, could benefit, and their families were benefiting from the experiences that we've had.
I love that. Purpose for pain. And yes, purpose, of course, was written for you because your recent book, Raising
Mhm.
Nathan Against All Odds, Discovering the Blessings, Joy, and Purpose in Raising a Child with Disabilities, you received a prestigious award, International
Mhm.
Impact Book Award. Share with us briefly this another milestone with your family, with
Yes.
Nathan being, of course, at the center of this. How does that make you feel?
It very purposeful, very blessed. He's just amazing, as I said. And this is not just a mother's pride of amazing. Everybody tell them, this is a bank, your son is amazing. And I go, we know, we know. He's in a high school, a mainstream high school that has 1,700 students, and maybe about 120 of them have special needs in
Mhm.
a special ed classroom, but the school's program integrates special ed children with general education children. And his homeroom teacher said to me, Mrs. Ebanks, right throughout the day, my classroom is interrupted. Everybody coming in here to say hi to your son. And he is just an amazing person. And I thought, it's time to update his story, because my first book, Raising Nathan, Every Life as a Story, was written when he was 7
Mm,
and he was now 18. So I figured, people need to see the difference, because each
difference.
stage carries a whole different level of learning, I call it. And then Nathan had a major hospitalization, second one. He had bowel obstruction, his intestine wrap up in a ball. And I was told that it is usually common for people who have had any kind of abdominal surgery, and hence that's what happened. and they had to cut off 9 inches of his intestines. And so he
Wow.
went through a very similar process as when he was born. And interestingly, the second time was very healing for me because it helped me to understand a lot of what took place the first time. And it made me appreciate that living in Jamaica with not as many resources as we have here in the United States, how blessed it was that the doctors were able to do what they
Mhm.
do to save his life.
Right.
So it actually shifted the lens through which I view the whole experience. And so the book is written very candidly. There was a retelling of the earlier stories because the first time I wrote it, it was in pain. The second time is through the lens of hope. And
Ah,
also sitting on this side, I better appreciate the journey that got us to this point. And so I felt it was important to retell the story. So each chapter has a takeaway in terms of lessons.
yes,
And I spoke to the whole impact on community, on church, on people, because disability impact every area of life. And so I
that is
wanted to
true.
share authentically how this has been for us, because not everybody has been as inclusive as we would like.
That is
But then
true.
I learned that they don't know, and people don't know what they don't know until they know. So I felt it was an opportunity to educate about what would have been helpful at what point, for us and for other families and so on. And so when the book was entered into the competition, it was entered while it was in the pre-release stage, and by the time the book was released, it's published by TBN Trilogy Publishing.
Mhm.
And by the time it was fully released, it had won this award. And it is a beautiful, it's a beautiful achievement from the perspective that it brings disability into the general conversation, because the award is in a literary space.
Yeah,
And it's a space where conversations of disability seldomly is heard and seldomly comes up. And so it provides a beautiful point for other people to be aware that we all have stories and that all our stories matter. And so for me, it's a win as well for the disability inclusion conversation. And I encourage other parents that there are people who need to hear your story, because my perspective carries one angle. When Nathan was born and I was looking for materials and reading materials, there was nothing that was written locally within the Caribbean or Jamaican community that I could put my hand on. And when I read other books that were written by other parents in other countries, it was not reflecting my identity as a Black Caribbean woman
hmm,
and as a Black Caribbean mother, with the experiences that we have with limited resources and limited policy. And so I found when I was reading those books and hear them complaining about getting 100 bottles of Ensure versus we not getting anything at all, it made me a little angry. And
yeah,
so I wanted to share our perspective. And there's a university in Dominica that has been using the book with their special ed students,
awesome, awesome.
to give them that sense of who we are as a Caribbean, body, Caribbean identity, so that as we are designing programs, we are designing programs and support that are responsive to our unique needs.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing that. The
Mhm.
fact that for from a Caribbean perspective,
Mhm.
sometimes you feel so alone.
Yes,
You
yes.
know, you feel like, okay, does anyone understand? And
Mhm.
then it's through your bravery and saying, okay, this is the situation. I'm going to take the mantle and just run with it. And you
Mhm.
were able to pen several books that are now able to empower so many mothers and for those who are
Yes.
trying to gain a better understanding as it
Yes.
relates to not just children with disabilities, but disability in of itself as
Yes.
well.
Yes.
Because inclusivity, it's not just about having conversations, but also enacting change.
Yes.
And there has to be a cultural shift
There has to be.
within various industries and
Mhm.
sectors in
Mhm.
order for persons to feel accepted and to be
Yes,
integrated. I
yes.
wish we had a lot more time, but thank you so much for
Thank
being
you.
our special guest for this week's episode.
Thank you.
Just briefly tell us how we can support the
Mhm.
foundation and where we can get the book to actually purchase.
The books are available on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, worldwide, both in print and ebook formats. And as I say to people, based on how the world has now leveled down with technology, you just have to walk into your local bookstore and give them the name of the book and the author, and they will be able to access it through Ingram, which is the retailer worldwide for books. So any one of my books, they're available through that means. In terms of the Nathan Ebanks Foundation, because I no longer live in Jamaica, that work has pretty much taken a pause until I can figure out, what to do with that.
Mhm.
I do have a new organization, Raising Special Needs Inc. We're available online. We have a website online, and we are on Instagram as well as on Facebook. And so people wanting to get in touch, because from time to time, people still do reach out to me. I still take the foundation's mail to say, hey, I'm going to Jamaica and I'm a physical therapist and I would like to give some service while I'm there. And I connect them with organizations. And so, people can reach out. They can also follow me personally on Instagram, on Facebook. And we have a YouTube channel, Raising Special Needs Inc. And I do post a lot of very helpful tips and tips that will support others, or resources that will support others in their journey.
That's where we leave you for this week's Inclusively You podcast. Thank you so much for joining us, Mrs. Christine Staple Ebanks, who shared with us such a powerful story. Remember to like and subscribe. I want for everyone to actually listen to this episode. Thanks again. Until next time, I am Keon Vaz.